What is the scariest thing you've ever seen while driving at night? A ducking owl standing on the carcass of a large buck in the mountains at 3 to 5 am. All you see as you approach are two glowing red orbs, then slowly it becomes huge dark form standing on the edge of the road with eyes of fire. Then you get close enough and this massive ducking owl just gives you the death stare as you go past. You realize it was just a large ass owl standing on the remains of fresh roadkill. Freaked me out for the rest of the dark part of the drive. Edit. Change corpse to carcass, because a couple cunts can't accept the interchangeability of the English language. Someone I knew locally came across a Jeep that had just crashed into the ditch on a highway at night, flipped on its top, wheels still turning kind of thing. He was the first on scene, so called 911, and ran down into the ditch. The driver, who was badly mangled, had been tossed from the car and was dying. This guy held him, and the driver died in his arms. The weirdest part of it all was that he found out the next day that it was his cousin, but he hadn't been able to recognize him. Driving down at a lane divided highway, I came up to a couple semis and went into the left lane to pass. I did a shoulder check to get back into the right lane when I saw headlights in front of me. In my lane, the car was going the wrong way. I managed to swerve into the ditch. Felt like I was mere centimeters from death. Thought my wife's scream would be the last thing I ever hear. And I never want to hear it again. The semis I passed all pulled to the shoulder to come check on us. Didn't see the car anywhere. I think they just kept going. Had to pull into a gas station after and collect myself. Edit. Rephrase to make less confusing. I was following a grey Toyota Tundra in a massive blizzard through Montana on McDonald Pass. He was going pretty quick most of the way, but must have been unfamiliar with how steep the final few miles are. He got away from me as I slowed down to about 35. Not 5 minutes later I passed his tire marks in the fresh snow that went off the side of the mountain. Pulled over and looked down to see his truck upside down and on fire about 300 yards down. Called 911. He didn't die, but was burnt up pretty bad. Sad and scary, and don't go 50 in the snow just because you have a truck or 4WD. An asshole overtaking a petrol tanker around a blind corner, coming my way, scared the shit out of me. I was on I-70 in Colorado going towards Utah, pulled over at a gas station at 8 p.m. Fueling up, I noticed a couple of attractive women pumping gas. On the other side of the pump was the man in his late 40s, just staring at these young women without notice of anything else going on around him. I walk inside to go grab some food for the next few hours of driving. When I come out I see both the younger women's car and the older man's truck are gone. I decided to hang out at the gas station for the next hour to catch a little sleep before hitting the road again. After driving for a few hours, I was speeding heavy. I pull over at yet another gas station. The young women are there getting gas and eating some food on a picnic table. Looked like they had been there for a while. I didn't see any sign or the man in the truck, but can't say I was looking very hard for it. Well, here is where it got creepy as hell. Can't say I didn't stare at them a bit. I mean, they were good looking as I'm watching them leave. I see in the next parking lot over some headlights turn on, and it's the same man as before. He leaves when the women leave once again. Okay, that's a bit weird, but could just be a coincidence as there weren't many places to pull over. I leave a few minutes later and catch up to them. Now this guy's riding there is with his high beams on. I decided to slow down and stay a distance behind the truck. 10 minutes or so later the women pull over once again to most likely get this guy off their ass. With a sign of relief the truck keeps going, and I continue on my way. About 1 mile down the road the guy just pulls off to the side of the highway. So I pull off a mile or so down the road again. Sure enough the women drive by and the guy is still following them. At this point we are out in the middle of nowhere and too many coincidences have happened. I called the cops to alert them, and about 15 minutes the cops pulled the guy over. I could have just seen too many horror movies that started like this and overreacted, but yeah, I never know. Better safe than sorry. I had just finished driving for Uber and was driving down the access road to my home around 3 am when I saw a body lying completely lifeless next to one of those motorized scooters. I pulled over and flagged down his buddies who were drunk and kept going without realizing their friend was lying on the ground. Ambulance arrived and took the kid away, but I never came to find out if he made it. Duck those scooters, man. I slammed the brakes once because I saw a deer in my peripheral vision. Upon closer inspection, it was a mounted deer head on a stick in the middle of the woods. Slammed the gas after I realized that. Not me but a friend. After dropping me off at my house around 2 AM, my friend calls me and tells me to pick my doors. He said he saw a man standing in the middle of the road and that as he passed him the man kept staring through him. Not at him really, but like there was something behind him in his backseat. He also said he could barely make out anything about the man other than his large eyes and trench coat. What really terrified me is that this happened on a street that only my family lives on and no one would have been out that night. Also, we are a solid 1.5 miles from the nearest neighbor. Freaked me the hell out. Edit, lock not pick. I live in a really safe country and a really safe city. I'm a photographer and I sometimes come home between 2 to 4 AM. Back then my parents lived in an attached group of houses built into a hill, and below the houses were our parking spots. This was a really quiet area with nobody around after midnight. Parked the car, wanted to get my gear, and walk up to my door when I see someone walking between my neighbor's cars. I asked him WTF he was doing, and he came towards me with just shorts and a short shirt. It was about -5°C out, and asked me what was up. At first I freaked out because he was walking up to me aggressively, but then I saw his pupils, which were as wide as dinner plates, plus he was skinny as hell. Told him to piss off and go home. He said okay, but I stayed to watch him. He went across the road to a group of houses and started snooping around there. Called the cops. They took him with him because he refused to ID himself. I used to deliver pizza and often had deliveries right at midnight when we closed. One time, late at night, I'm driving back to the store through a small neighborhood. Up ahead I see something. It's perfectly spherical, bright shiny thing, just hovering about 6 feet off the ground. Not moving at all. I pull up very slowly. Still doesn't move. Still can't comprehend what I'm looking at. Just this shiny hovering orb in the road at midnight. At this point my curiosity has overridden my fear. I'm the guy in the horror movie who dies first, because I just gotta know. Either I die, or I get a cool story, right? So I hop out of the car, and slowly walk up to it. I'm right in front of it, and still can't understand what I'm seeing. So I reach out and touch it. It's a balloon. One of those foil birthday balloons with the street lights shining on it, making it look weird out of context in the middle of the night on an empty road. This is a story about something that was really scary at the time, but kind of funny in retrospect. Once I was driving through an unfamiliar stretch of desert and mountains on my way to a campground in Utah. The sun had set, and it was pitch black outside. We hadn't seen a town for a long time, which was fine, because we didn't need fuel, but it's worth noting here that, before it had gotten dark, the last several exits that had been marked on the map didn't appear to have any people at them. There weren't many other cars on the road that we could see, but eventually this vehicle came up behind me, clearly going much faster than I was. He passed me on the left, and as he went around me, I could see that it was a pickup truck with a lift kit. The pickup got back into my lane in front of me. He stayed there for a few seconds, then suddenly swerved to the left and slammed on his brakes. He then cut back over into my lane, so he was behind me, and switched on his brakes. He followed me like this for some time, getting right on my rear and flashing his brights repeatedly. I started getting nervous at this bizarre and aggressive behavior. I told my wife to help me find a populated exit. The road began to spiral down a steep mountainous slope. What followed next was a progression of increasingly alarming road signs that seemed like they belonged in a Looney Tunes cartoon, where a character is about to careen off a cliff. These signs said things like, "Watch for wildlife, frequent wildlife crossing next 20 miles, watch for ice, watch for falling rock," etc. None of them would have been scary on their own, or maybe in the daylight, but at night, in a situation where I was starting to panic, they seemed alarming, and it seemed like they were ridiculously increasing in severity. At one point, a sign popped up that said road damage. Since I was in panic mode, I remember exclaiming, Why don't they just fix the damage instead of putting up a sign? Eventually, we found a town with lots of lights and I promptly exited. I was terrified the guy would follow us, but he went on past me. I pulled into a gas station and that's when I figured what I probably should have realized a long time before. I had my brights on. A dead, butchered horse laying in the road. Someone had completely skinned and butchered a horse, took the choice pieces of meat, and just dumped it on the highway. I almost crashed into it. Driving to work at 4:30 am and seeing a cyclist with his head split open and brains on the road. I was fetching someone from his workplace. Had to go through some fields, and some parts of the road were dark. I saw a thin long object wiggling at an upright position at the side of the road in front of me. Totally freaked me out. I thought I was finally experiencing something extraordinary. As I got closer I realized it was a tail of a cow. It must have escaped from some field and was hanging around at the side of the road. The cow itself was black, the tail slightly lighter in color. That's why I only saw the tail moving first without seeing the whole cow first. A lonely abandoned shack with a bunch of arrows pointing to it, saying come in. Edit. To answer some questions I was on my way to Texas to see family and the GPS took us down a back road. My mom and I joked that it was a 6 Dungan. 3 am on a lonely road, and I was the passenger. An old man only wearing a bra, panties and high heels was casually walking down the road. My friend who was driving didn't believe me and went back around. Sure enough, he saw him, and we were like WTF. I dropped my GF off the night we saw the Mothman Prophecies. It wasn't a super scary movie, but it had some scares. I take the interstate home. On the way, there is a curve where there aren't any lights, just a dark stretch of interstate. As I came around the bend, there was a guy in a black trench coat walking along the side of the road. As it was about 3 am, I guess I started him. So, when my headlights hit him, he whipped around, and I swear he stared me right in the eyes. My heart jumped into my throat. The whole event lasted maybe 2 seconds tops, but it had my heart racing. Not paranormal, but definitely scary for me. A hitchhiker almost leaping out in front of my car on a dark forest road late at night. The woman literally popped out of nowhere. Had to drift into the oncoming lane. Luckily there was no one else, and painted median there. Read a police report that she ended up getting hit minutes after I drove by. She was intoxicated and running from the police. Pretty ducking creepy. I hope she's alright. I can't imagine what the driver that hit her was thinking. I got off on my exit, and the whole road was covered in blood. I put on my brights and saw a bisected body of a large animal. It just made me so sad. When I first started learning to drive I was working for my dad, and one day after work he asked if I wanted to drive home. I was like alright. So I got on the highway headed for home, and while driving, I looked in the rear view and a guy on a quad crocod was coming up behind me. I thought nothing of it. I was sure he would pass or slow down. I look ahead again, and a few moments later I hear this sound, like metal scraping against the ground. I look around, and then look back into the rear view, and the bike was on its side, spinning down the highway, and behind it, I could see the biker on his back, legs and arms flailing kind of like a baby on its back in a crib. Then I watched as he disappeared under the vehicle behind him. I was so freaked out driving after that I didn't want to drive for weeks following the incident. Then eventually got over it. Still I can see the guy in my mind just sliding along the ground flailing about then being swallowed under another car.